Welcome back to Dead Smoke Radio. I'm your host, the hash smoking slasher, slinging dope takes and ripping real reviews.
And I'm your host, the Phantom Hater, haunting your feed with radio waves straight from the other side of the grave.
This is Dead Smoke Radio. No signal, no sanctuary.
Happy Halloween, everybody. If you're scared and don't have a Halloween costume yet, don't worry. You've made it back to Dead Smoke Radio. Whether you're lighting up, laying low, or just here to scare some trick-or-treaters, Transmission 1 reveals our first official Dead Smoke Radio Halloween special.
As always, a special shout out to the Dead Smoke Radio Discord. The real gravekeepers keeping this station alive and decorated for the holidays. If you haven't joined yet, find your way to the Dead Smoke antenna or check out the link below. A nice observation spot, exclusive drops, sneak peeks, and bonus content, like pie eating contests.
We apologize for our unfinished edits of Stranger Things Season 3 recap episode. We've had just a few adjustments outside of our normal Dead Smoke atmosphere. However, all you still tuned in and absolutely loved it. Thank you all so much for your support. We'll be circling back to Stranger Things recaps starting in November. But today's Friday, October 31st, Halloween, baby. It's our first official movie review. We'll be covering Hereditary 2018.
Transmission 1 is live. A new video drops every Friday at 6 p.m. from October 3rd through January 9th. Dead Smoke Radio has you covered for all your horror needs. Grab your pants, because this Halloween's about to get even scarier.
Without further ado, let's jump into this terrifying film and uncover what Hereditary is really about.
Directed by Ari Aster, who you may also know directed the films Midsommar, Eddington, and Beau is Afraid. Hereditary is absolutely horrifying. This film perfectly demonstrates that jump scares aren't always needed to scare the shit out of your audience. This story follows a family dealing with grief after the death of their grandmother. As the movie progresses, you start to notice that they all become more disconnected between each other, which is honestly completely understandable and very human thing. You get the feeling that grandma was such a heavy influence on the family that now without her, the family's just a hollow shell of what they once were. You're never quite sure whether what's happening is mental, spiritual, or something way more fucked up.
Toni Collette's acting performance is what makes this movie so scary. It gives this film this raw, unhinged, and helpless reality. The rest of the cast, especially Alex Wolff, deliver equally impressive performances that sell the horror without ever feeling exaggerated. And Colin Stanton's haunting score was what really drives this movie to what it is. Hereditary is this film about an inherited pain, guilt, and the things that we pass down without realizing it.
We're diving into the deep end of Hereditary, so if you haven't seen it yet, skip to this time on the screen before this review ruins your life. We'll meet you there, kind of like a page jump in a choose-your-own-adventure book. Just because you're skipping spoilers doesn't mean you can't still sit at the round table. This message will self-destruct in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The movie opens with the obituary of Ellen Taper Leah, who is the family's grandmother. The only thing to note here are her passing, as well as when and where the funeral will be taking place. The camera slowly pans towards a dollhouse, immediately giving off the feeling that these people have no control over what's about to happen to them. Here we meet Peter and his dad, Steve. After he wakes up his son, he heads outside to a treehouse where we see Annie sitting in the car, alone. He climbs up the treehouse and wakes up his daughter, Charlie, who you'll come to know as a very deeply disturbed individual. From here, they all head to the funeral where Annie gives a testimony about her mother. She explains that she never really knew her mother because she is very secretive and distant. During the memorial, people start to line up to pay their respects to Ellen. Charlie walks up and starts to kind of stare at her, emotionless. This creepy-ass dude is still smiling at her while standing there and creates this uneasy feeling that Charlie might be in danger, but not at the moment.
Later that night, Annie tries to comfort Charlie, but Charlie reveals that she's worried about what the future holds. now that her grandma's gone. This makes Annie resent her own mother more for stealing her child's love from her. As she tucks Charlie into bed, she notices a word written on the wall. There's no explicit meaning behind this word other than it's used to somehow mark Charlie for this strange ritual that needs to take place. Annie goes to shut off the rest of the lights when she finds a box with some of her mother's belongings in it. As she looks through photo albums and other keepsakes, she discovered a book titled Notes on Spiritualism. As she opens the book, she reads a note that says, "My darling, dear, beautiful Annie, forgive me all the things I could not tell you. Please don't hate me, and try not to despair your losses. You will see in the end that they were worth it. Our sacrifice will pale next to the rewards. Love, Mommy." After reading this, she angrily packs it all away and shuts the lights off. This is just one of many examples of why this movie's better watched at nighttime, because when Annie looks back, the camera pans to a dark corner of the room. She sees her mother, but did you? Try watching this late at night with all the lights off or with the brightness turned up higher, and you'll see her mom standing in the corner smiling back at her. When she turns the lights on, her mom disappears.
Sorry, Mom, but if that was you, I'm calling Ghostbusters.
Before she leaves, she turns away a diorama she made of her mother trying to breastfeed her grandchild. It's a very disturbing scene showing that the grandma wanted full control over Charlie.
Peter's at school the next day, staring at this girl's butt who sits in front of him. He makes plans with all of his friends to smoke pot, but is caught off guard by the teacher when he is asked to partake in the class conversation. The girl in front of him turns around and just stares at him, kind of like how highs stare at fruit roll-ups when they're just sitting in the kitchen. If you're listening close to the class conversation, you'll notice that they're talking about Heracles, aka Hercules. The discussion is about how he ignores the facts and the signs about his fate and continues down his destined path. Charlie's in her classroom trying to construct a doll of some sort. She's supposed to be taking a test and is getting called out by the teacher for playing with the toys before finishing her test. Then a fucking bird flies into the window like a Windex commercial. However, this commercial takes a darker turn when Charlie takes a pair of scissors from the classroom and cuts the bird's fucking head off when no one else is looking. Well, someone actually is looking. It's Mike Tyson. Later that day, the family gets a call from the cemetery staff. They inform Steve that Ellen's grave has been desecrated and her body is missing. Steve lied to his wife by saying that it was just bills, and Annie lies to him about going to see a movie. She's really just going to this relief group. Annie opens up to the group that she loved her mother deeply and that she understands the struggle of being a single mother as well as a woman. She drops a couple of bombshells like saying her brother was a paranoid schizophrenic. She says in his suicide note he blames their mother for trying to put people inside of him. She continues explaining that she cut ties with her after her son was born. She sunk her claws in deep and never allowed Charlie to fully embrace her own mother. She always hated and resented her mother for that. She releases that she's the black sheep of her own family, feeling trapped. Peter smokes weed and gets a text from his friend about a party the next night, but someone is stalking him as we can see someone's breath blowing in the direction of him.
Charlie's seen eating M&Ms, but clicks like it's a Kit Kat commercial. She glued the head of the bird that she decapitated earlier onto a pill bottle with sticks and feathers. A weird kind of pulse activates through the room. This pulse directs Charlie almost like a laser to a cat would. Peter asks his mom if he can take a car to go to the party. She tells him to take his sister, but Peter can't find her. Charlie's led outside and sees her grandma sitting in a burning field, but this is only a vision. Annie drags Charlie back inside quite aggressively and demands that they go to the party together. As Charlie and Peter head back to the party, they pass a telephone pole that lingers on the camera for a few seconds before it cuts to the next scene. If you look closely, you'll notice this symbol that's been carved into the pole, signifying that it's been marked by this strange ritual. This is the same symbol that Ellen was seen wearing around her neck at her funeral, but the symbol also looks like Mike Tyson's face tattoo. Annie arranges her figurines to show that her mother, even after death, still has control over her and her family. At the party, Peter brings weed and ditches his sister to go smoke it with a few of his friends. He tells Charlie to stop being such a baby and go get some cake and hang out. Rewatching this, we noticed that his crush was looking at him as if she knew what was going to happen to him and felt a little guilty about it. Charlie eats some cake, but she has an allergic reaction to it, which closes her throat super quick. Charlie warns her brother that she's in danger, and her brother rushes her to the hospital. Charlie rolls down the window, gasping for air. Peter's driving over 80 miles per hour, and he notices a dead deer in the road, far too late. He swerves out of the way, narrowly avoiding the deer. However, Mike Tyson's standing on the side of the road and gets revenge for Charlie cutting off the pigeon's head from earlier, instantly decapitating her. Peter slams on the brakes in complete shock. He tries to check on Charlie, but he's petrified by the silence that follows. He slowly drives back home without telling anyone what just happened. The next morning, Annie takes the car and notices her decapitated daughter sitting in the back seat.
With the music perfectly executing the hopelessness and loss of the situation, Charlie is buried. While Peter is smoking weed with his friends, he starts to experience the same pain that Charlie suffered before she was brutally decapitated. His throat starts closing up and he starts having these intense emotional breakdowns. Annie doesn't want to even interact with her own son and waits outside in the car. She leaves and goes to another grief meeting. When she arrives, she gets very depressed and doubtful and attempts to leave. She is then stopped by another one of the grief members, Joan, who's very straightforward and honestly overbearing about her approach towards Annie. She gives Annie her number so that they can stay in touch. The following day, Annie visits Joan and mentions to her that her mother used to embroider welcome mats just like the one that Joan had. She drinks some tea that Joan has, but it looks like it's laced with something. Maybe not drugs necessarily, but something that marks her for a ritual, confirming that Joan is part of this ritual in some way. Annie explains that she is sleepwalking and that she is having dreams about setting her son on fire. Later on, Annie is greeted by her husband in her art room. He finds her recreating a graphic scene of Charlie's death and is deeply disturbed by this. That night at dinner, Annie lets her feelings be known to Peter about how she feels that he is completely responsible for Charlie's death. He rebuttals her and says that it's her fault for forcing Charlie to go to the party with him. This tears the family further apart. Annie goes to the store to pick up some more supplies for her project and sees Joan in the parking lot. This was set up by Joan and has nothing to do with coincidence. She then convinces Annie that she was able to communicate with the dead and that she would be able to help her communicate with Charlie. Back at Joan's place, they perform a seance, communicating with the dead, giving Annie the tools to communicate with Charlie. Before she leaves, Joan carefully instructs Annie on how to perform the seance, and she tells Annie, "You did not kill her." As she's driving home, she hears a click, as if Charlie was sitting right in the back seat.
That night, Annie struggles to sleep. She has a dream that ants are infesting their home. When she enters her son's room, she sees him covered in ants. He asks her what she's doing, but she responds in a confused state. As her son cries, saying, "Why'd you try to kill me?" she lights herself on fire and wakes up from her dream. She wakes Steve and Peter to show them that she's a medium and is able to communicate with Charlie. Things get a little intense, and Charlie possesses Annie. She scares the boys when she starts to sound like Charlie, but the link is severed after Steve throws water on her. New words are seen written on the wall, which basically means "open the gates of hell." At school the next day, Peter experiences the same pulse that Charlie saw before. As he follows the pulse, he sees his own reflection smiling back at him. He freaks out and is excused from class. Peter calls his father, terrified that he's being threatened by a vengeful spirit. Steve threatens Annie very passively, hinting that he will take Peter away from her if she continues this strange behavior. Annie breaks a chair and completely snaps. She destroys everything in her art room, giving Steve a very human reaction, thinking that his wife is losing it and going crazy. As Annie walks through the house, she walks into Charlie's room, where the spirit frantically draws in a book. Peter is trying to sleep in his room, but hears Charlie clicking. She asks if he wants to build a snowman, but when he responds, she loses her head over it. Again, Annie grabs his head from behind his bed and starts to pull, but whenever Peter snaps back to reality, his mother reassures him that what he's seeing is real, but he can't tell his father. Annie tries to burn the book the spirit was drawing in, but when she does, it sets her arm on fire, showing that there's a link between the book and their fates. She struggles to put out the fire, realizing that she needs to remove the book from the fire. She goes back to Joan's to reveal what happened to her, but Joan isn't home. As the camera pans into her apartment, we see that Joan has been conditioning Annie and her family into some demonic ritual where Peter is set to be the main host. A diorama of what appears to be three headless bodies bowing to the same toy that Charlie was seen playing with in class. Annie takes Joan's welcome mat and rushes home. The camera pans on room 202. That number's not random. It's a palindrome, which means it reads the same forward and backward. It kind of mirrors the movie itself. Everything looks normal on the surface, but underneath, it's twisted. Room 202 is literally the doorway where Annie steps into the cult's world without even realizing it.
Peter is at lunch sitting by himself when he starts to hear his name. He looks across the street to see Joan yelling at him. For some reason, only Peter reacts to this, but Joan is yelling the phrases at him that were seen earlier in the film. This could be part of the cult's final ritual step to fully allow the demon to possess Peter. Annie reveals that the demon is King Payman, the god of mischief. It is highlighted in the book that she is reading that this demon will possess only the most vulnerable male host, which just so happens to be Peter. It's stated that he will bless his followers with riches beyond human imagination. This is why Ellen sunk her claws into Charlie instead, because Annie blocked her mother out of her life when Peter was born, not allowing her the chance to condition him. Annie rips through photo after photo, finding out that her mom is part of a cult. Not only was she heavily involved, but she is seen as the cult's queen. Her mother sacrificed her own family for the sake of the cult and in the name of payment. This would reward their family more so than any of the other followers. She heads into the attic to find her mother's beheaded corpse inside of a ritualistic circle. Peter is at school when he's finally possessed, and he raises his hand in the middle of a lesson like he's having a stroke. Then he starts to slam his own face into the desk multiple times, breaking his own nose and causing blood to spray everywhere. His father picks him up and drives him home, breaking down into tears. Annie further cements her crazy persona to Steve as she pleads to him in the driveway. Steve opens and checks the attic after Annie begs him to look. It is confirmed that she is not seeing things, but Steve is very worried about his wife's mental health. She explains to him everything that is happening and tries to prove to him that she is not crazy. She throws the books that she has into the fire, causing Steve to spontaneously combust into flames. Annie stands there paralyzed in fear as the same pulse that Charlie and Peter saw now possesses her too. In another moment where if you don't have the brightness up high enough, you'll see Annie now fully possessed and stalking Peter. She crawls out of the room midair, showcasing once more that sound is not needed to convey the absolute horror. Peter calls for his parents as he searches the house, stumbling into his father's charred remains. He looks to his left to see a naked man standing in the doorway, smiling at him. Just then, his mother pops out of the corner and attacks him. He retreats up the stairs, though his mother is close behind. He runs up into the attic and closes the door behind him just in time. Annie is seen upside down on the ceiling, banging her head against the door. Peter pleads for her to stop. The banging stops, and Peter raises to his feet. He may have missed the naked cult member standing behind him. He sees a picture of himself with his eyes burnt out. He tries to wake himself up, but sees his mom fiercely cutting her own throat while suspended midair. This scene is truly terrifying and very hard to watch. He sees another cult member and jumps out the window, falling to his death. The pulse now centers itself and possesses Peter. When Peter comes to, he sees his mother's body floating into the tree house. As he enters, he's welcomed into the new world of his followers. King Payman has successfully been summoned by the cult.
Now there's a lot to unpack here at the end, so allow me to break it down further before our actual breakdown. Basically, the entire movie, this family was conditioned and herded into this demonic ritual to bring back one of the kings of hell, Payman. The grandmother agreed to sacrifice herself and her family's souls in exchange for rewards beyond human comprehension. She would be known as Queen Lay and have more powers and dominion in hell because of her actions. Those on earth would be blessed with riches and power over those they deem unworthy. Ellen tried once before to put Payman inside of Annie's brother, but failed because he killed himself before he could become possessed. Her husband also died, making it harder for her to present a male host for Payman. This is why she pushed Annie so hard to have a kid. When Peter was born, Ellen tried to sink her claws into him, but Annie was overly protective and shielded Peter from her. Once Charlie was born, Ellen was able to latch onto her instead. It's not explicitly stated when Charlie was possessed by Payman, but it is known that Charlie is always had Payman inside her. The only way they could transfer Payman into a new host is by decapitating Charlie and completing the ritual with Peter being the new male host. The film ends with the cult declaring their devotion to Payman. All that's known is the cult successfully summoned one of the 8 kings of hell.
That's been our recap of Ari Aster's Hereditary. Now it's time to kick off our Dead Smoke Radio rating breakdown.
After each recap, we rate the film out of 100 points across 10 different categories, each worth up to 10 points. Then we throw it on our Dead Smoke Radio tier list and see where it sticks.
Kicking off our breakdown with story and writing, we're scoring this one a 9 out of 10. Ari Aster crafts a slow burn descent into a grief of madness that feels both personal and cosmic. The story unfolds like a ritual you didn't mean to start, and by the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late. The pacing is deliberate, maybe too deliberate for some, but the payoff is pure nightmare fuel.
Horror and atmosphere, 10 out of 10. It's that kind of horror that lingers in your bones. The dinner scene, the attic, the clicking, the clicking. I had to save my whole damn apartment after this one. That just sounds so fucking stupid.
What does that even mean, bro?
I don't know, dude.
Acting and characters gets a 10 out of 10. Toni Collette delivers one of the most haunting performances in modern horror. The way that she switches from grief to rage to pure threat is unreal. Alex Wolff's breakdown feels raw and real, and even Millie Shapiro as Charlie gives you chills with every blank stare. The cast sells every second of the madness.
Direction and style, 10 out of 10. Ari Aster doesn't just make horror, he fucking composes it. Every frame feels handcrafted. The dollhouse imagery, camera pans, that slow, dreadful ass zoom that makes you feel like something's watching you. This dude's turning trauma into architecture, and it's phenomenal.
Sound and score gets a 9 out of 10. The sound design in Hereditary is just unsettling. The ominous sounds that make you feel like you're standing in a church that God forgot about. Colin Stetton's score doesn't tell you that you're scared. It convinces you that you're cursed.
Rewatchability, we're giving it an 8 out of 10. This is a masterpiece, but man, it's fucking tough to sit through. You don't rewatch Hereditary, you survive it. I had to rewatch SpongeBob for 3 hours straight just to feel joy again.
Impact and uniqueness scores a 10 out of 10. Hereditary redefined what modern horror could be. Psychological, devastating, and still genuinely terrifying. It's one of those movies that crawled into pop culture and never left. Aster set the new gold standard for elevated horror and grief horror in general.
Stoner appeal is a 7 out of 10. This ain't your Munchies movie, folks. If you line up before this, you might start questioning if your mom's part of the cult. If you can handle the paranoia, it's one hell of a trip, like a third eye open type of trip.
Scare factor, 10 out of 10. From Charlie's accident to the attic reveal to the final shot, this movie is straight up nightmare material. It's not jump scares, it's the kind of horror that makes you look over your shoulder for the next week.
Fun factor, 8 out of 10. I don't think it was necessarily fun in the sense of like Chuck E. Cheese fun, but more in the sense of like intense fun.
And that's it for our Dead Smoke rating breakdown, setting our final score at a 91 out of 100 for Hereditary. It's a horrifying masterpiece, a family drama wrapped into supernatural dread, with performances that will haunt you for life. Hereditary isn't just scary, it's unforgettable. Now it's time to slide over to the Dead Smoke Radio tier list and see where this cursed gem lands.
Receiving a score of 91 out of 100, this movie hits our first spot on our official Dead Smoke Radio movie tier list. This list will be separate from our TV shows, as they're the same, but very different. Hereditary is truly a terrifying film that belongs in our Hall of Flames, S tier. It does horror differently than others in the genre and defies its terror, but not needing to rely on jump scares to be genuinely horrifying.
That's gonna do it for this review. I hope you're all having a very spooky Halloween and you've enjoyed kicking back in the smoke here with us on Dead Smoke Radio. Comment down below what you've dressed as for this Halloween. I've been your host, the Phantom Hater. If you've enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and please share the fear.
And I've been your host, the Hash Smoking Slasher. Be sure to tune in next week where we'll be covering part 1 of our Stranger Things Season 4 recap. We'll be releasing full episodes every Friday at 6 p.m. on YouTube and Spotify. Check out our Discord for exclusive content and catch bonus scares on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook at Dead Smoke Radio. Stay tuned, stay spooky, and remember, the smoke never clears.